Mastering the Etiquette and Threat Landscape when Operating in West Africa.
If you do not have the right network, you do not have the right training, and you don't understand the environment, you're set up to fail.
Welcome to the Circuit Magazine, the #1 source of information on protection matters, the industry-leading magazine for all security professionals who want to stay ahead of the game.
Traveling to West Africa. It's not really died down over the pandemic. It's kept strong. The EP community has been kept busy. And so we're very, very pleased to be talking today to Hilda Dafe Nwachukwu, who is the Global Security Director at Cummins, often based in Nigeria, but now a global role. We're going to be talking about etiquette. We're going to be talking about global travel provisions in quote unquote West Africa. I'm here with Elijah Shaw. Why is this such a timely topic?
Well, let me first say I'm really bummed that I didn't have the opportunity to sit in with you guys and conduct the actual interview, because I was really looking forward to this one. There is, when you're dealing with that part of the world, there's some insights that you can get that you just don't get anywhere else. And I think that our guest tonight that did a good job at presenting those challenges, relating them, translating them to the Western world, and we can talk about the synergy that goes back and forth.
Indeed, and I think, first off the bat, we're not suggesting that there is a West Africa to travel to, just as there is not an Africa. East Africa looks and feels very different to Central Africa, to West Africa. But even there, and I think we'll go through this, there's a very different feel between Francophone Africa and Anglophone Africa. I don't know, have you done trips to this region and have you picked up on some of the cultural nuances?
Oh, quite a bit on my part. In fact, we have some licenses inside actual Nigeria. And so that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to make sure I got on this call, but unfortunately my schedule prevented it. But to your point, yes, everyone, we kind of joke on this end, Africa's not a country, it's a continent. And when you get in drill down in that continent, you have different countries. And so even when you're thinking about regionally, you're still going to have these separators. And so it's the professional security specialist who understands those nuances, who understands those different protocols, and are able to translate that both to their client and to their team.
Indeed, because on a very, easygoing level, you want to say something like Ese or Akaro in Lagos, but you want to say Sanu Malam, Sanu Daiki up in Abuja in the northern Nigeria. Very, very different culture. And
check you out.
Well, no, I used to run events in Nigeria and Ghana. So just a couple words, it's actually the extent of my knowledge, right? But a couple of words suddenly opens a few doors. But more than that, and what I found, personal experience, everybody in Nigeria, for example, wants to speak with a very high register, a very, sure. Advanced written English wherever possible, right? So I guess if you understand that, then you too can begin to do it. Like when you write letters officially, absolutely use the most, high register of English. That's the same in the French world. In Senegal, you might be able to speak some Wolof, but excellent, crisp French will go very well, and poor French will not go very well.
Okay.
It's just these little things that perhaps people don't think about. What are some of the other cultural nuances? Because I know even just recently you've been to East Africa, and again, a new set of nuances to take note of.
Sure. Well, let me first mention, that's what I think the wonderful thing is about the Circuit podcast, is that we bring these stories from literally all over the world, and we bring these different perspectives from all over the world. And I just think it's a great thing. And so, those that are interested in listening to the podcast can pick up these jewels and these, again, perspectives from that answer questions they might not even have known they had. And so, and then to your second part, Yeah, I just got back recently from Angola, which was an experience in and of itself. With that said, I was a little bit removed culturally because we were confined due to some COVID restrictions to a pretty tight bubble. So the protective bubble that we were in, and then also the medical bubble that we were in, prevented me from interacting a lot with the countryside. But I did get to interact with security professionals and local liaisons. And the important thing with that, my takeaway is understand and respect the culture, and you'll get much more mileage than if you go in there, particularly with a strong, Western attitude, as if ours is the only way things get done.
Mm. And that attitude and perhaps preconception, it's what we want to change on this podcast.
Sure.
And a lot of people are talking about, terrorism this and, kidnap and ransom that. And yes, that is a big problem. But I would put it to you, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's nowhere near in the same magnitude as car crashes or petty crime.
Sure.
So it's a bit of a balance, isn't it?
Well, I think that's the case everywhere. So of course, the sensationalism of crimes that involve bodily harm, crimes that involve death, or those are going to lead. Those are going to be the headlines. And so when you're an outsider and that's all you get, you kind of lose perspective on some of the local or micro issues that you can face much more commonly. We talk about that in close protection circles, which is if we're protecting a protectee, it's much more likely they'll have a medical emergency than they will an assassin, shooting them in most theaters. And it's the same thing. So, we think about operating in certain parts of the world. And again, in the case here, we're talking about Nigeria. And yes, there's problems in the North. Yes, yes, there are issues of terrorism, of extreme violence. But, much more often in terms of protectors and security managers, the issues that we're facing are a little bit more mundane. Of course, we have to keep the big picture in mind, but we also have to make sure, access control is in place. Contingency plans are in place. Business interruption plans are in place. That can happen from a number of common things, including just the weather.
Indeed. The weather, as we discovered on our West African event, it's very important that there are no thunderstorms in Lagos if you want someone to join a Zoom call.
Great point. In fact, I had the same issue in Angola. I was trying to connect and that storm was there. They were like, no, it's not going to happen.
I like it. Well, this will be very interesting. We're going to talk to Hilda about the threat landscape, reality versus the hype. And we're going to talk about protocol nuances and just being, polite to get the job done. So
Wonderful.
this will be great. This is Hilda Dafe Nwachukwu from Cummins, and we're going to talk traveling to West Africa.
And now, let's meet one of the contributors to the Circuit magazine.
Corporate security in West Africa. Today, we're going to be talking with Hilda Nwachukwu from Cummins. And Hilda is recently been anointed as the Global Crisis Response Manager. But Hilda, of course, you do have a fantastic background in West Africa and in Nigeria. And it's a pleasure to have you on. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Colin. I'm happy to be here. I'm very well, thank you.
I love it. And great to catch you. I'm here with Sean West, and together we're going to explore what, everyone should think about when operating in West Africa. Of course, people have a lot of global operations, but West Africa, we've done a fantastic West Africa Circuit magazine event, which was where we first welcomed you. And but one thing I'd like to do with these quick fire questions, I've got 3 quick fire questions. Can you tell us a little bit about the threat landscape? What is the problem that corporate security is really trying to solve in West Africa, quote unquote, right now?
I think one of them will be around travel security, given how large West Africa is, and then in terms of risk ratings, right? We have several risk ratings. So whereas you go to Ghana, which is just by the corner, and the risk rating is low, you come to Nigeria, it's different. You go to Mali, it's different. So just understanding that West Africa has a number of countries with different risk ratings is something I think that we should all look out for. So that's travel security is definitely my number one. And then of course you can talk about things like insurgency. You can talk about things like terrorism, and then of course you can talk about things like petty crimes. Right? You have quite a number of those as well. So it's the whole scope, right? From petty crime to the biggest, maybe terrorism, and and how it impacts on travel security. That's what I would say to that.
Excellent. No, thank you. I like that. And then on a more personal level, where does your passion for this, cause come from?
So I grew up in a neighborhood that was pretty unsafe. So I found myself really just trying to stay safe. And so it became a part of me, right? Being the one who would always, reach out to friends and family, to say, hey, listen, we should do ABC just to keep safe. So it just became a part of me. So I think safety, I think security, I think about, even before my job, before I told the career in security, I'll think about, the homes we're going to live in, is it the last one on the block, and those kinds of stuff. So growing up in that neighborhood, which was pretty much unsafe at the time, right, really drew my passion for security. And yeah, that's what I would say.
No, that's inspiring. I like that. That really shines through. And for the benefit of the completely uninitiated, and of course we recognize Mali is not Ghana, is not Nigeria. But what would you say to the completely uninitiated security professionals out there that have not considered what's going on in West Africa?
I would say you need to be in touch with what's happening. Reach out. Maintain networks, right? The best way to do it is just to maintain network. What I've found out is if you are you have a rich network where these things are discussed, even though you may not find the need for those information at that time, it gets into your subconscious, right? That stuff is happening there. And then, it just prepares you for, you never know when, right? You will need those information, and then you have those right networks with which to advise your client or your company or your employer or whoever, or even family who decide to do business or to travel for weekend in these areas.
Cool. Just thinking of West Africa, I spent a lot of time there actually, in Sierra Leone and Guinea. I love the place. I love to travel there, although I don't get to go there very often these days. Just like to ask, what should international security operators or professionals do to prepare for a trip to the region, West Africa?
So what we do, as you know, with security, the security situation is very, 1 minute it's calm and the next minute it's very bumpy, right? But watching those indicators, most times you have indicators that suggest that there's going to be unrest soon. So watching those indicators very closely and doing an assessment for each traveler, of each individual who's meant to be visiting any country, and making sure that you have their contacts, you're able to reach them, you have an evacuation strategy should an unrest happen. You just understand the norms in those areas, and then you help these individuals who are traveling. Most times it's just for business, right? When we have business leaders or technicians going about, they are focused on getting their work done. Most of the time they are not thinking about security or safety. So just making sure that they understand that there's certain nuances, right, in these countries or in these locations where they're going to be visiting, and just awakening that consciousness, right? Making sure that they stay in contact, touching base with them on a routine basis, making sure that they also have a point of contact on ground that you can reach out to should they become unreachable. These are very critical things that are needed, right? To just make sure that you are able to ensure travel security. And then it also just helps the individual to focus on work, right? Knowing that people have their back.
Yeah, for sure. And I think everyone's very health conscious now in the middle of the global pandemic. And I know when I travel to West Africa, unfortunately, I contracted malaria. And I know that's one thing. If you're traveling there, you're not used to that sort of thing. Make sure you get your malaria tablets, vaccinations up to date. That's something to be very conscious of.
Absolutely.
Traveling to the region for sure.
Absolutely. So, just updating. Typically, we'll have a checklist, right, of medical security contact just to understand where you are from a health standpoint, right? So, if there's an intervention, we already have some records that we can pull out to help to intervene very quickly, right? So, there's no much downtime. As you know, time is very critical in face of a health in face of a health situation or a security situation.
Well, Hilda, can I build on that, on sort of the soft skills in a way? Because I remember I used to run a lot of events in Nigeria and Ghana, even during the Ebola, episodes. And what I remember was some of the soft things like etiquette were really important. And people in the Francophone world, for example, were very, very keen to have excellent French, not good French, but excellent French, for example. It was very important. And I know if, for example, in Nigeria, written letters have to be exceptionally considered, and there are some key phrases and so on. Maybe you could bring some of that etiquette to life that people should be aware of.
So, thank you so much, Philip, for that question. So, what I would say is for any individual or for a security professional planning a trip to any country, it's very important that you understand the basics of the culture, the nuances particular to that country or that state that the visitor or the security professional is planning to travel to, right? Understanding those basics and just helping the individual who's traveling there or whoever is traveling there understand a bit of these. It just helps, that individual to, get in the flow of things as quicker, right? Quicker than, someone who doesn't know wolf, right? So just understanding this basic, and it doesn't have to be that deep, to be honest, right? Because, West Africans do know that you have a lot of people who are, not necessarily from West Africa coming into the area, right? To just do something, to do business or for tourism and all that. So they do understand that you have visitors come in, right? So they will not expect you to understand the culture totally, but just having a basic understanding helps them to give you that acceptance. And if you're there for business or whatever, you find out that you're sealing up your deals quicker, because they feel like, hey, this person understands what we're doing. So those soft skills are very important. And usually I'll advise that it's contained in those travel packs, right? Where someone just has to read up maybe a 2-pager to say, hey, this is what you say, if you're coming to Lagos to say Cairo, those kinds of, little tiny things, right? That just help you that endears you to those who live in those areas. Right? So that's what I would say. It's very important to pick those. It doesn't have to be very deep. You don't have to speak Yoruba, you don't have to speak Ashanti so much, but just having the basic understanding of the culture, the things that are considered taboos, the things that are considered, no, you can't do this, right? Just understanding that if you're going to the north, you probably should not be dressed in a certain way and those kinds of stuff. Those tiny little things do matter. And, it is typically contained in the security brief that's contained in the traveler's pack.
And could you bring some of those nuances? Maybe Lagos is one place that many people will find themselves going to. Could you bring to life some of that etiquette? Because I think that would be really useful for the Circuit Magazine listeners.
Yeah, so I don't think you would have too many nuances like that in Lagos because Lagos is very cosmopolitan. So they will typically understand that you're not Nigerian. They understand that it's a diverse population that you have. You may have more of those kinds of nuances in maybe some other bordering states, maybe Oku, Ondo. But Lagos is more, so you talk about Lagos, you talk about Abuja, those are more cosmopolitan. So they're used to having, people. And then it's a mix of diverse people from different cultures. So it has kind of watered down those kinds of nuances, unlike you would have in the core north or the core west or the core east or the core south, right? So, for a traveler coming to Lagos, I will not be so worried about those kinds of etiquette or nuance. I wouldn't be worried about that as much as I would if you were visiting maybe the northern Nigeria or some other part of Western Nigeria.
Okay. So obviously we know that you're responsible for all of West Africa, and I know it's very difficult to generalize, yet saying West Africa in itself is a generalization. I wonder if you might be able to reflect on the difference between Nigeria and perhaps other countries in West Africa, because I know that it's all different. To go and speak Wolof, it's totally different than speaking Yoruba. But what is it that people should expect that's different?
So you're correct, right? I sometimes laugh when people refer to Africa as a country, because that's a whole lot of countries in Africa, and Africa is a continent. Now you talk about West Africa as well, right? You have different countries in West Africa, and then you talk about Nigeria. You have different states in Nigeria with different cultures, different ways of doing things, different etiquettes, and those kinds of stuff. What makes Nigeria different? I would say one thing I do know is that there's a lot of diversity because Nigeria is a very diverse country. It's very easy for them for Nigerians to accept non-Nigerians because we're already diverse anyway. So it's okay to have more diversity, right? There's no harm in having more diversity. So you would see more acceptance, of non-Nigerians, of other West Africans, of other nationals, right? In Nigeria, right? That's one thing I think really, really stands out. And because of its population, I doubt that it will be very difficult to find if you found maybe a Polish man in Nigeria and there's no other Polish man, right? You just need to make some network and you find somebody who you can relate with, who's come from your area. And then, so that's what Nigeria brings to the table, right? Trying to, compare it with other countries because of how diverse it is might be a little tough, right? Because again, you don't want to cluster these countries together and then trying to, compare them with all of the countries in West Africa becomes very difficult. But one thing I know is that, there's a lot of acceptance for non-West Africans in the West Africa region in Nigeria as well.
Perfect. And obviously Cummins is an international company, and manufacturing based in Nigeria is growing. Industrial participation is growing. It's no longer enough to simply rock up in any given country and say, yes, buy my thing. There must be some sort of economic development. And as such, I suppose that means people are going to have more permanent operations in the region. Would you be able to paint a picture of what Cummins is doing and maybe some of the challenges you face in global security?
Absolutely. So Cummins is very much interested in Africa as a continent and in Nigeria in particular. In 2019, Cummins recently built a $35 million facility in Nigeria. That's our biggest own facility in Africa. That shows commitment to Nigeria, to the Nigeria brand, and constantly improving the environment within which we operate. We are involved in community development, ensuring that schools in our neighborhoods are well taken care of. We have a tech program for female, catching them young and just making sure that they understand that tech is not just a male thing, but very passionate about women as well. So Cummins is very big on the African market and very interested in the African market, Nigerian market as well, and then West Africa as well, right? One of the challenges I think we face as Cummins, from a global security perspective, like I said, is as an insecurity in Nigeria. It's becoming more and more, tough to move technicians from one part of the country to another. We have a client base that spreads across the entire West Africa. So moving, techs, and for us at Cummins, safety of our employees is priority. It comes before any, trying to make in revenue and all that. So just making sure that we move our employees from one point to another in a manner that is safe, right? That leaves us rest assured the employee to be going back to their families safely is something that puts us on our toes. Yeah, in comments and in global.
I like it. And I guess one thing we love at the Soga magazine is to sort of tie different communities together. So on the one hand, we sort of speak to the corporate security and customer universe, and of course, our own community of protectors, often private security, not always embedded. Do you have a strong EP presence? And what would your advice be to, let's say, somebody, because we do have operators in Nigeria who are listeners, what would your advice be if they wanted to get a job with a corporate entity in West Africa? Because people are key, as you said. What would your advice for that community be? Would they have to come from the police or the military? What kind of backgrounds and training and how should they approach it? Because there's lots of multinationals now operating West Africa. What would they have to do to consider, getting a job with one of them based in the region?
Yeah. So I don't think that, having, a background in police or the military is sole criteria to, getting a job, as an EP with any multinational or any company. What I do know is having the right training, having the right network, and understanding the environment you are supposed to work in. A combination of these three things is what I will need, or what the entity will need to succeed. Right. So you could have a police background or a military background or a civil service background. If you do not have the right network, you do not have the right training, and you don't understand the environment, you're set up to fail. Right. So these are the three most critical, in my own opinion, the most three critical things that I think, an EP should look out for, right? Should they decide to pursue an EP career in West Africa?
Yes, and I think that's the same worldwide network, training, environment. That's what you need to succeed. If you don't have the network, you kind of get your name out there. So you need to grow your network, and you need to have the right training to be able to take the opportunities as they arise.
And so Hilda, obviously, we know that the ASAS community is big in West Africa, and we know that there's some great things going on. But what's next for you? Are you going to be taking on any more ASAS projects, or perhaps collaborating more globally? Any books on the horizon? I don't know. What's next for you?
Yeah. What's next for me? Right. I think I'm having worked in West African region for most of my career, I'm just going to be more focused on getting global perspective, right, to security. That's my focus, and that's my goal as I get into my new role. Just focusing now broadening my scope beyond West Africa, right? Just like I said, identifying the network, right, in beyond West Africa, and keeping those networks beyond West Africa, and just understanding more of global security beyond West Africa. That's what's next.
That's a great sentiment, and perhaps one that everyone can learn from. And I don't know about you, but this pandemic has forced us all online, and it's forced us to collaborate more and have more of a global perspective. We spoke with a gentleman called Kenji out of Tokyo the other week, thinking about Olympic Games. Now we're speaking with you, and I think that this pandemic is going to make us all a lot more global.
Absolutely. I remember so many years ago, we talked about globalization. We used to talk about globalization in meetings and all that. I think we ain't seen nothing yet with regards to globalization. One thing that the COVID-19 pandemic has definitely done is that it has made us understand that you can reach out, to any part of the world without necessarily moving from your seat. However, we must be careful because, having those, interpersonal relationships are also critical, right? So just knowing how to strike that balance, right? Whilst we virtually not missing out on the opportunities to also meet physically, to just put that human face to stuff, it is very critical. So just, I think, finding that balance with working virtually and also, trying to meet up in person so we can, foster that interpersonal relationship and take it to the next level is very critical because, like I said, in security, network is critical.
Perfect. Well, that seems like a great sentiment to end it on. I want to get back to traveling to West Africa. I specifically want some jollof rice. And I know that, of course, one form is better than another, but I'm not going to take sides.
Sean, what do you think about that? Which jollof rice is better?
It's been a long time since I've been there, but yes, maybe we can go together, Pelham.
We'll do a competition. No, I like it, and I do miss it. Obviously, there's lots of wonderful things to do and see, and I just hope we get access again. It'll be good.
Absolutely.
Well, Hilda, thank you very much from Sean and myself. This is a great Circuit Magazine podcast session. More people are traveling to West Africa. More people are going to be traveling to West Africa, and West Africa is a powerhouse, a center. It's just getting more important. So it's a pleasure talking to you. I hope our listeners are focusing their minds and thinking about their future career prospects now in West Africa. Nice to see you. We will catch you again very soon.
Thank you so much, William, and take care.
Thank you very much. Traveling in West Africa, I feel it is within all of our grasp a bit more. There's more work, there's more travel. And, thank you very much to Hilda Dafe Nwachukwu for sort of shining a light. Elijah, what did you take away from today's session?
I think Hilda nailed it. I had the opportunity to listen to her during the West Africa forum that you held a while back. And so I think she does a great job at kind of conveying the point and, highlighting the complexities of working in that part of the world, but also how it kind of translates into the things that we do on this side of the globe.
Indeed. And many of the things that she suggests, it's equally applicable if you go to Latin America. Sure. Just think about where you're going. Don't take your preconceptions with you. I think that's a great takeaway. And of course, petty crime and car crashes they're still top of the list versus something really, really, big in the media, which, it's always an issue, but we've got to be realistic.
For sure. I mean, we don't want to downplay anything, but what we do is risk management. And if we're doing mismanagement, we don't want to focus on, the sensationalism. We don't want to focus on what I call a sizzle reel and make sure, and by doing that, neglect the other important things that could affect the lives of our clients.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we'll see Hilda at one of our US events because she's now in the US, which will be great. What else have we had recently? I know you just wrapped up a course, Elijah. What was that? Was that about? How was that in person?
I did. It was an in-person course, which went extremely well. We held that in Colorado in conjunction with ESI. So it was another one of my celebrity protection courses. I had a great group of men and women, which I think is important to highlight, that came out and spent a few days with me, and it was very well received based off of the feedback. Maybe they should tell you that, because if they tell me, they say it was great. So you should maybe poll everybody on your own.
Yeah, please write in. Did you love it? What were your thoughts? And also meeting again in person. How was that for you? Because I know a lot of people are itching to do it. And in fact, next week on the 19th of August at the Hyatt Regency Phoenix, I am running an in-person event, the 5th Annual Physical Cyber Convergence Forum.
Nice.
And there are some familiar faces. Monica, who we had on the podcast not so long ago. Sure. Christian is going to be there. Joe Ortera is flying in.
Okay.
We've also got Carlos Francisco, the corporate security translator, who we had on the podcast previously. He's coming in as well. Chris Story and Chuck Tobin. And lots of local players that probably people know, like Jason Viop and many, many more. Christina Duffy as well.
This is a great lineup. I mean, that's going to be something that if you can't attend in person, because as you mentioned, this is an in-person event, of which we'll be taking the necessary precautions and still being safe about it. But if you can't make it in person, you can also access this via the web, correct?
Well, not on the day. We're not going to make it live on the day, but we're going to put recordings later, but only so we actually maximize on-site attendance. We got to be safe. We got to be careful, but this will be a very unique opportunity, especially to meet up, like with your course, after a great deal of time. So we're going to do lots of nice content, but would of course encourage you to attend in person. Physical-cyber.com.
Nice.
Now, a little bird tells me that you have an anniversary, in fact, this week, because it is the first year anniversary of the audiobook, Introduction to Celebrity Protecting and Touring. How has that been for you?
Well, the first thing I would say is thank God for Facebook, because you get those little reminders when you have some anniversary that comes up. And I can't tell you how much that's been helpful for me for birthdays that I would have otherwise missed of the individuals. But I guess it is that birthday of the audiobook as well. And, it actually brought back some memories. It caught me by surprise. I didn't realize it had been a year already, but it brought back some memories. And one of the things that that came back to me was how initially resistant I was to actually doing an audiobook. It was uncharted territory for me. And I know you know a part of this story, but originally I was going to have someone else narrate the book. And as the samples kept coming in, they weren't saying it like I would have said it. They weren't emphasizing things like I would have emphasized it. And my peer group said, "Hey, Elijah, why don't you do it yourself?" Now, again, that wasn't something I was familiar with. You've got much more experience in broadcasting and AV than I do. And so it was a bit of a learning curve, but I worked with some professionals. We got it out. It was quite a task, where somebody might have done it in 2 takes. I did it in 20 takes. But once it was done, it's labor of love, it came out. And it's great to know that because at this point, once it went out on all of the platforms, I could just sit back and look at the metrics. And it's great to know that people from all over the world pick up this book and every day. And so again, it's been a year. So that's both humbling and also great motivation to realize that, when we're uncomfortable doing something, do it anyway. What's the worst that can happen?
I love it. And I'm really pleased that it kept you as the narrator. Yeah. I like you, I can't really imagine who else would have narrated it.
Well, let me know. I'll send you some of the samples if you want a good laugh.
Yeah, no, that'll be good. And I'm sure you had lots of glasses of water to keep going. I've never actually done something like that myself. So, people should check it out. 1 year anniversary, and now, of course, in audiobook as of a year ago, which keeps the community going, doesn't it? And much like these podcasts bring the pages of the magazine to life, and of course, authors such as yourself, and we're sort of generating interest now. Just like last week, and I don't know if this is going to become a regular thing, but I'm very pleased about the participation on the NABA app and the BBA Connect app.
Yes. Yeah, it's wonderful to see men and women engaging on that, again, from all over the world, on both of these platforms, which are sister platforms. But you can see that, some of the power users, the ones that produce content on there or comment on things and really bring great perspectives.
And, to that, I want to say thank you to Pedro, to Maurice, Everett, Trey, Mohammed, Markiest, and Jermaine, and Nick, and a few others, including B and Eugenie. I'm really pleased because you've been posting the most over this past week. I guess, what am I saying? I'm saying thank you, and let's keep going. And on the BBA Connect side, we've had Spiridon, Shakila, and John Branchcombe, again with Stu, posting quite a lot. Oh, and Suzanne Dancer, thank you again.
Because all the way from Australia.
All the way from Australia. That's been awesome. And I was actually on a Clubhouse session with Suzanne where we were already thinking about the 2032 Olympic Games in Brisbane and the security therefore.
Wait, 2032?
Yeah, because when it was announced, And, this came up with our Circuit Magazine interview with Kenji Okamoto. If you remember, we were talking about the Olympics, which has now just drawn to a close with its main event anyway. We reflected on what Australia is going to do all the way out in 2032. Hey, it's a bit far away, but why not?
Bro, I can't remember what's going on next week. So.
Well, at least we've got these great yardsticks, and I'm pretty certain there'll be a lot more work for protectors for the Qatar World Cup, for the French Olympics, things like that. So it's all to play for. But yes, keep those comments coming, and people have sent in some articles for the Circuit Magazine, and we're very grateful. So keep that coming too for the next edition. But yeah, very much looking forward to the Phoenix event next week on Wednesday the 19th. Let's keep plugging away at bringing to life the pages of the magazine, but also breaking down preconceptions of geographic regions such as West Africa. It was a pleasure to talk with Hilda today. I know she's going to do some great things now in her global leadership role. And yeah, I want to shine a light on more geographic regions.
Agreed, bro. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, one of the wonderful things about the Circuit podcast is that we can have a global network of people to interview, but also those global perspectives. So that's, wherever you are in the world, you can get something from and realize that there's a vast community that's going through some version of what you're going through.
An excellent sentiment to finish on. Perfect. So from Elijah and myself, thank you for listening to another great episode of the Circuit Magazine podcast.
You have been listening to the Circuit Magazine podcast. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to not miss an episode.